Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next family chat. My name is Caroline Davis, and I'm the graduate assistant for transition programs. I plan and organize the family chats as well as our family newsletter. And today we're going to be talking about making mistakes and what that might look like for your students. And today I have Titus and Chris joining us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Titus Adeleke, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Students here at UNCW.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Kaler. I am a senior from Huntersville, North Carolina. I am majoring in communication studies here at UNCW, and I'm a part of the Orientation Leader program, as well as the Campus Conduct Board, Student Academic Honor Board, and the Student Government Association.
So as you can see, Chris does a lot around campus, so he's definitely a familiar face for us. And before we jump in, we are going to be talking about the Office of Dean of Students today. So if we say ODOS, that's what we're talking about. That's just the condensed version. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comment section, and we'll either answer those in the comment section or we'll answer them live during our family chat. So my first question is for Titus. What do you do for ODOS?
So I guess I'll start by saying ODOS is like not the principal's office. That can very much feel like it sometimes. Students are naturally coming from being homeschooled or high school oftentimes, and so their natural brain is to just connect it to the principal's office. But that's far from what we are and what we do. What I do specifically, I'm responsible for all of the daily administration and oversight of the student conduct system, the university's entire system. And so that, yes, that's a lot. All 22,000 students at UNCW, when it comes to their social life and their student conduct, that is really my main role. I assist with like implementing all the procedures, policies that's outlined in kind of the student manual or code of student life as we know it. And so student handbook, that is where all of kind of the violations that a student is responsible for the moment they kind of come to UNCW, they can find them there. I coordinate and work with Chris on the Campus Conduct Board, Student Academic Honor Board, which is a really unique leadership position at UNCW. Gives students an extreme amount of responsibility because they are essentially hearing officers for us. They do what I do, but together, and they hear cases of students, meet with them, and determine really what outcome their case will have, and also the sanctions that will be kind of given to a student. Most of the time, usually it can be suspension, meaning that student is removed from the institution for a determined period of time. But below suspension, they also give educational sanctions as well. And so I serve as a hearing officer, meaning I meet with students whenever they are documented for an incident and they have certain violations that they've been charged with according to the Code of Student Life. And then, I do assessment, do a lot of other things. I work with, a wonderful staff in the Office of the Dean of Students. And then, that's kind of a little bit about what I do in a nutshell.
Thank you. And then what is the ODOS philosophy on student conduct?
The philosophy, good people sometimes make poor choices. I like to think of it sometimes as, well-intended people sometimes get into sketchy situations because that's really what it can be. And so we understand that students are coming into a new environment, oftentimes just a new place, meeting new people, being exposed to all types of different things daily. So things are going to happen. Mistakes, if you want to call them that. I like to think of it very much as just real world experiences, how those students respond to it. That's our job, is to help them navigate their response to those experiences. But we understand we're not condemning anyone. We don't see any student as coming in to cause chaos, right? We see all students as having being well-intended, making those good choices, or being good people, but then they end up making those poor choices sometimes that could impact their academics or could derail their college experience. So we want to just help them kind of get out of that before it becomes a habit. So
that leads nicely into my next question for the two of y'all. Is it okay for college students to make mistakes?
I'll let Chris answer that.
Thank you for that. I think it is. I think it's a part of the entire process and like journey that people take when they come to college. Like making mistakes, you learn so much from things that you do wrong, and you just like have to learn to not do it again, basically.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like where would you be? Where would I be? Where would anybody really be without making mistakes? It's one of the more human, probably arguably the most human thing you can do. Um, Falling down, picking yourself back up, and just continuing on. As Chris says, like that's how you learn. And sometimes it can be as simple as not to do it again, but other times it can be way more complex. It could be a habit that you have to learn to break. It could be ingrained in your family, right? And these are habits that may not align with your goals as a student at UNCW. And that's hard, right? Just to all of a sudden tell someone, I need you to unlearn everything you've learned for the past several years. Like some people might not see that as fair. And then, so absolutely right. As Chris said, I mean, you gotta learn somehow, but making mistakes is an extremely natural way to do that.
For sure. And then Chris, this next question is for you. Can you give us an example of a time that you've made a mistake in college, and then what did you learn from that?
For sure. There's a lot of mistakes to talk about, but I think touching on what Titus had just said about something that's been ingrained in you for so long. When I first got to UNCW, high school was all about like going to school, then practice afterwards. And like you had a structure in place that was not your creation, it was already there. And when I got to UNCW, I was like, I just need to focus on academics. I think that is the most important thing. And I ended up with all this free time that I did not know what to do with. So like I struggled academically because I thought I had so much time to focus on it. And I had to learn how to balance my life and how to balance my friendships and social experiences and stuff like that. Because your education is not only just about like classwork, it's also about what you do with your extra time and how do you build habits into your day, good habits and stuff like that.
And so we know it sounds like you started taking your free time to get involved on campus. And speaking of that, you are on the student conduct board. So can you talk a little bit about what you do with that, and if students are interested in getting involved, what that looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So the Campus Conduct Board and the Student Academic Honor Board are great opportunities for students. You're able to see the other side of the Office of the Dean of Students. Like Titus said, good people make mistakes sometimes. And it's really important to like go in with that mindset that like these are also your peers, like these are people that you live with, that you like go to class with, and you can understand and empathize with them and like see their side of it, which I think makes the process very fair. And I think it's a great opportunity to see how that process works. And if you want to become a part of the Campus Conduct Board, I will let Titus speak a little bit more about that part.
Yeah, I mean, we do with COVID and Zoom and all of that. All of our recruitment will be virtual for the most part. And we actually started our recruitment for this past academic year, the one that we're currently in, through Zoom, because we usually start around March in the spring semester. So obviously that's coming up soon. But we do, we send out flyers, we send out announcements. It's pretty open. There is an application. Our interest has kind of increased every single year for the past 4 years or so. So much so that unfortunately we've had to turn students away, which is, you hear that and you're like, really? But I mean, there's a lot of interest here, but it's also, like I said, a unique opportunity due to the fact that students, you get to hold your peers accountable, and you get to decide, how do I want my degree to look once I leave UNCW? Because if you continue to kind of just let things happen and people be unchecked, those same people will also get a degree at some point, most likely the same degree as you, and may not have had those instances or opportunities checked, and they could unfortunately continue that behavior well outside of UNCW, and people will start to compare. Not that you want to focus too much on what people think about you, but if they're employing you, if they are, family, friends, like that's kind of important, right? So yeah, we love to have an open application for really anyone that's not a freshman, because when you're a first year student, you don't know anything quite yet. I mean, you're just learning, getting acclimated to the institution. But we start that process in the spring, you have to maintain a 2.0 GPA or higher. And be in good standing, of course. Doesn't mean if you had been through conduct or met with myself or any number of the other hearing officers, you are ineligible. It really just depends on your sanction and your standing as a student.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And like they both said, that is a fantastic opportunity for students if that is something that your student might be interested in. But back to talking about making mistakes. If a student does make a mistake, what advice do you have for them to first accept it and then move forward?
All right, Chris.
All right, cool. We unmuted at the same time.
We're in sync.
I think something that I had to learn is that self-reflection is very important to do. I mean, I remember making a mistake and I would just be like, oh, that was a mistake. Let's not do that again. But I actually had to take a moment to understand what led up to that mistake, how I reacted afterwards, how I felt during it, so I could understand what I did and like how not to repeat it. And also to understand that mistakes are a part of life. And as long as you can learn from them, you can move forward from them and not repeat them.
Yeah, being humble. In ODOS, we oftentimes have an opportunity to advise a student through their case if they choose and they want that option. And so when I meet with the student, if I'm selected as their advisor, our job is to prep them for their case and present their best self. One of the things I always overemphasize is you have to have some sense of humility, no matter how you might feel, or if you feel like you were wronged in some way, shape, or form. A hearing officer or a board or anybody is going to see what kind of ownership can you take. And so being humble and understanding, as Chris said, like your choices, you have to break it up, because when you're in it, it's like a gauntlet. You're just going through it. And then when you take a moment and look back on what took place, you start to see along the line, like, where could I have done something different, or which new path could I have chosen? And that takes a lot of humility, because you're like self-analyzing and you're acknowledging something went a little sideways, and you are confronting it and hoping to not make it a habit so that you can continue on at UNCW, and be successful, or whatever you define as success. And so to not make excuses, it's important as you go through it, because the event happened. It's already done. Now let's reflect and let's talk about how do you move forward. When you make excuses, it puts you back in the event. And that can get dangerous, because then you start to change how you might have seen yourself through the entire experience. So humility, practicing humility as much as possible, and then trying your best not to make those excuses throughout. Doesn't mean you can't contest things and engage in dialogue. That's the whole reason why we have this process in the first place. But we also want to educate at the same time and get you to a place where you're comfortable acknowledging what took place, and then hearing from the student specifically, like, how do you want to get past this? Like, what are your goals for moving forward?
I think Titus brought up a really good point of like how you like look at your path forward. Making a mistake at UNCW is really not always the end of the world. I mean, I myself have gone through the Dean of Students process. I mean, I had met with Titus, and I think it was a very interesting experience where like I sat down with Titus and he was just like, where do we go from here? Rather than like, don't do this again. It was more of a, how are you going to get to where you want to go? And I went through the process, and like I ended up getting involved on campus, and I sort of got better because of it, if that makes.
Yeah, I would say Chris is like a beautiful case study of like, I don't know, just this is what can happen. Everybody, like, it's not unique to Chris. It's more so like things happen, but then how do you respond? And obviously just him being a leader on campus, all the opportunities he's had and continues to have, like, I would say Chris is like a model student, and someone who has been in a sketchy position, a position they probably don't want to get back into anytime soon, but then they were like, oh, this is probably something I need to never go back to again, right? And let me make the most of this experience. And even myself as a student, long ago at UNCW, I also went to the Dean of Students office. Like, again, not unique to anyone. Your situations may not be unique, but how you are in those situations, that's unique to you, because it's you. And then how you respond, that's where Chris just by default is above a lot of his peers, because many of his peers, they may never have that experience. Not to say, they're any less than, but they're missing that ability to go through something that hopefully doesn't put them back too far. And then how do you analyze the situation and be better? Like, how do you just continue to improve? And that's, unfortunately, we see that happen all over the news, right? In real life, you see this individual, this person, this scandal, this horrible thing happen to them, and they're well past their college years. I mean, now they have huge responsibilities. They have dependents. They have mortgages. Like, these are things that are compounding, but then unfortunately all that can start to crumble. In college, if you can have that unfortunate experience and not let it derail you too much, that's where you can truly see and take advantage of that opportunity, because it is unique. College is unique. You're not going to be in a position where you're surrounded by hundreds of your peers doing the same thing every single day often. I mean, that's just a unique environment to be in. So yeah, no, Chris is a great case study, like example. And a lot of students should talk to him, and students like him, to just understand how do you make the most of your experience at UNCW.
To continue the complimenting Chris thing that we have going on for us, I met Chris the summer before his junior year, and I would have never been able to know that that was something that he experienced. And I think that goes to show not only how great ODOS is at, like what Chris said when he was talking to Titus, how do we move forward? But it also goes to show, like Chris said, it's probably not the end of the world. And so I do think that Chris is a fantastic example for that. So we have ODOS, we've heard about all the great things we do and all the great people that work there. What other resources does UNCW have for students that might have made a mistake?
Yeah, so I mean, I can start with that, right? In the Division of Student Affairs, there are a ton of departments and personnel that are all here because of students. So that leaves students with a ton of resources to go to for whatever, they might need. Thinking in ODOS specifically, not only my colleagues, but specifically our case manager, her main role is really to create that environment for students, to promote their access to resources that hopefully will optimize their success, right? That's kind of a fancy way of just saying this person cares and you can go directly to them for really anything. If you are unsure about what to do, where to go, ailing your academics, personally, how do you navigate just college in general, our case manager is a wonderful stop. And then to supplement that, ODOS is as well. Like, while we do hold students accountable, that's again like maybe half of what we do, or not even half, like a quarter of what we do. We definitely are a stopgap, and we want to be there for students for whatever, because we are connected to every office in the division, and then really we're connected to the entire university and all departments. So if you don't know where to go, please come to ODOS. But then specifically with things that may happen as a result of you coming to ODOS, our counseling center is right upstairs. So we're all in the same building. So we have that synergy and collaboration. And then CARE also is a wonderful resource. They're victim advocates, amongst other things. But anytime the student is going through something and they might just want help, even if it's not necessarily related to, it's always worth asking for one, but most of the time, someone is going to be able to be there for them. And so with case manager in our office, CARE, counseling center, like those are just some immediate, easy, quick resources for students that can really help them through our process should they ever find themselves in a position like that.
Awesome, thank you. And then, so now to talk about the family and parent side of this, what can parents and families do to support their students when these things happen?
To you, Chris.
Okay. I think one of the biggest things is just being a presence, being able to be there to either talk to, bounce ideas off of, or just saying like, hey, it's going to be okay. Because for the people that I've met here at UNCW, if one of my friends makes a mistake, I know that the biggest critic in their life is probably going to be themselves. So having somebody else criticize them along with themselves doesn't always help them. But I just think being like a support system and like being there for whatever they need, whether they ask for it or not, is really important.
Yeah, that is important. The critic piece, because students, when we meet with them, they beat themselves up like all which ways most of the time. And for every 100 students that beat themselves up, there can be 1 or 2 or 5 that don't. And so that's where parents or guardians, whomever, can come in and really drive the point home to say, we're trying to help you not get suspended. If you pay money to the institution, you put in the time and effort into an application, like you're trying to get something out of UNCW. Like, why would we now sacrifice that for whatever you're going through now? So parents, that support system, they can really help us by helping the student not get suspended, by focusing on those habits that they're really struggling to break. Going back to what I said about their long-standing habits that they're bringing to UNCW, but now that's out of line, it's out of alignment with their actual goals academically, personally, kind of grow through the university, then that's where that support helps. So like, hey, we need to break this now because it's not in alignment with what you're trying to do now. And so that's where the support from family can help. And in the unfortunate event a student is placed on a status of disciplinary probation, which is one of our sanction outcomes, we do reach out to family members, usually emergency contacts. If in the event the specific incident involves like alcohol or drugs and they're under the age of 21, we reach out to that individual to let them know, like, hey, your student's on probation. Let's work together to make sure they do not get suspended, because after probation, suspension is usually the next natural sanction outcome, should that student continue down that path. So we reach out, we do work with families, parents, guardians. We want to make sure that they're involved, because sometimes, they're footing that bill, they're contributing somehow. And if it's not monetarily, they're contributing with their emotions, their time. It comes in different ways, but it usually takes a village. You hear that saying, when you're raising someone. Same can go for when they're going to a 4-year institution. It can take a village sometimes. So there's some people invested in that student's success, for good or for better or for worse. And so the worst can sometimes be us. So we want them to be in tune with what's going on, so we can at least limit those instances.
Awesome, thank you. So I have one last question for you both, and it's just any final tips or words of wisdom for families on this topic of making mistakes?
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead and go first. I think understanding that not every student's journey through college or UNCW looks the same, and there's not one blueprint for success, and that success is not measured the same with every student, is something that's really important to keep in mind. That your student's journey is not going to look like one of your friend's students' journeys, and that's okay. Like, that's all a part of the process, and just know that, like, as long as you're there to support them, that they will succeed.
To empower your students as best as possible, and that is something that's not going to look the same for every single individual or family. But the more you can give that power to them to manage what takes place on their own, that'll be a huge help for them down the road. It just will. The earlier you can give that, empower them, the earlier you can give them that autonomy, while still being on the sidelines, of course, to help them through. That'll allow them to make the most of their time here and then have fun. That is what college is usually about, is having fun. You're only in class for a small time. As Chris mentioned, like, a lot of that learning takes place outside of the classroom, and that just goes with living with other people. It's going to be contentious. There's no which way about that. You're not going to like necessarily every single roommate you have in college, but then how do you navigate that? It's just that's where this empowering them comes, the student comes into play. But yeah, reminding them to have fun, because I think they expect their loved one to be like, we need you to be careful. We need you to, do this, not make mistakes, even though that's going to happen. But it'd be cool to hear them, families tell their student, like, have fun, like, enjoy your time. It's an extremely unique opportunity. You're not going to be in a position like this forever. Unless you want a job like me, I guess. We work with students all the time, but like working in student affairs gives you that benefit. But yeah, just having fun and empowering them, so that when those mistakes come, because they will come, they're confident in themselves to say, okay, let me navigate this, and then reach out to family if I need that assistance. But yeah, just enjoy your time.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I had a great time talking with y'all. And before we finish, I also want to thank everyone that was watching it live with us. And if you called us late, you can watch the whole episode on Facebook or YouTube, and it'll be there. And then if you would like to sign up for our family newsletter, you can just go to uncw.edu/transitions, and you'll click on family programs, and you'll click on family resources, and you'll be able to sign up for that there. You can also follow us on Facebook at UNCW Transitions, and we will be back in March for another family chat. Hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.